What is the best industrial fabric cutting machine? Ever wondered what the best industrial fabric cutting machine is? Which one is best for you? Choosing the best industrial fabric cutting machine for your workshop will depend on your specific needs. You must take following factors into consideration to make the right choice, such as factory business model, cutting fabric types, daily production, purchasing budget, factory space, operator skill requirement, if need dies or nesting software, cut pattern quality, material wastage, consumables and electricity consumption of each machine, etc. While there are several industrial fabric cutting machines in existence, we will only be focusing on those that stand out. As we know, the most popular machines include multi-layer fabric cutting machine, digital cutting machine, CO2 laser cutter, industrial die cutting machine. Firstly, let's understand the basic knowledge of those four industrial fabric cutting machines. What is multi-layer fabric cutting machine? The multi-layer fabric cutting method is exactly how it sounds. Before being fed into the cutter, fabrics are spread on the table by hand or by auto fabric spreader layer by layer. Then with the assistance of the nesting software system, this computerized cutting machine cuts fabric layers, as per the command given in the computer system. What is digital cutting machine? The digital cutting machine uses a knife blade that follows a computer program path to creating the cut patterns. A digital cutting machine generally consists of a flat working area, fixed table or conveyor belt, and a set of cutting head above the working table. The cutter can move in 4 directions along the program cutting path to cut out the shape. What is CO2 laser cutter? The CO2 laser cutter uses gas to power up and generates light when electricity runs through a gas-filled tube. Since CO2 laser beams are usually easily absorbed by fabrics, that would lead to a part of the fabric heating up and getting vaporized. The CO2 laser cutter can be used on different fabric types, including jeans, fleece, lace, silk, cotton, alcantara, softshell, polyester, linen, and felt. What is industrial die cutting machine? Die cutting refers to the process of using a machine to produce cut-out shapes in massive quantities. For this machine, you would need a die. A forged die or steel strip forms the metal strip used to make the die, and then it is placed on the block of fabric layers. With pressure from the ram head, the sharp end will then cut the fabric. With a die cutter, you can create the same shapes, all with the almost exact dimensions over and over again. This is very common with cutting fabrics, as it makes the cutout shapes look as consistent and professional as possible. Factory business model. Firstly, you must consider your factory business model. Simply saying is whether you are more focused on customization or bulk orders. If your business is more focused on customization orders, you will need a more flexible cutter to make fast delivery at a low cost. And if more focused on bulk orders, you will need to consider massive production cutters. Production and cut pattern sizes of plain fabric. When using industrial fabric cutting machines, you want your device to produce as much plain fabric per day as possible. The higher the production, the higher the efficiency. However, the output of this depends on the type of industrial fabric cutting machine. In this aspect, the multi-layer fabric cutting machine and the die cutting machine have a higher production capacity due to the multi-layer cutting method. And the multi-layer fabric cutting machine is more suitable for massive orders of big shape patterns, like soft furniture and garment, while the die cutting machine can better deal with bulk orders of small shape patterns, like shoe uppers, hats, and gloves. Now that we have discussed the multi-layer knife cutting machines and die cutting machines, let's look at CO2 laser cutters and digital cutting machines. These two machines are generally suitable for single-layer fabric cutting only. But sometimes, with the assistance of different knife blade designs and plastic film, the digital cutting machine can cut like 5 to 10 layers of permeable fabrics. And for different types of pattern layouts and sizes, CO2 laser machines can be equipped with single or 2 or 4 laser cutting heads. The multi-head model will make the speed several times faster. And the production of 2 sets of CO2 laser cutters with 4 heads can equal 1 set of the industrial die cutting machine. When making the single-layer fabric cutting comparison, the digital knife cutting machine is more used in cutting thicker materials, such as soft glass, rubber mats, floor mats, rugs, and carpets, due to its higher cutting speed than the CO2 laser cutting machine. And materials that tend to have a yellow edge after the hot cutting of laser are also more adaptable for the knife cutting machine. Because of the laser focal length problem, we take the most used 50.8 mm focus lens and 100W laser tube, for example. We recommend that customers mainly cut the thickness of the fabric within 1 centimeter. If you need to cut more than 1 centimeter, configure a higher focal length lens and a bigger power laser tube. For general fabrics, the thicker the material is, the slower is the laser cutting speed. The vibration knife does not have such a problem. There is only the problem of blade wear and service life. Choosing the suitable knife blades is one of the critical factors affecting the cutting speed and product quality. Cutting fabric types. CO2 laser cutter's laser beam can be considered as a hot knife for fabric. The other 3 cutters are all using cold knife blades to cut off the fabrics. Compared with the hot cutter, a cold knife won't generate any smoke or result in yellow edges, and can deal with most fabrics. But for some polyester, satin, or silk materials, cold knife cutters tend to leave fraying edges. Purchasing budget. All 4 different cutters have different models, and different brands and prices differ a lot. But generally speaking, purchasing prices are listed from lowest to highest: industrial die cutter, to CO2 laser cutter, to single-layer digital fabric cutter, to multi-layer fabric cutter. Factory space needed. When calculating needed factory space for the cutters, CO2 laser cutter, single-layer digital cutter, and multi-layer fabric cutter sizes plus the left and right each outward expansion of 1 meter, the front pattern pickup table 2 meters, and the rack fabric feeding area 1 meter. Operator skill requirement. The die cutting machine has the highest operational requirement among the 4 cutters, since this is majorly a manual process. These are the people that will control most of the process to ensure accuracy. Operators must understand how to set the die cutting machine to make each die, which is crucial to the fabric cutting process. The pressure has to be exact for the cutting blade, die, and ram surface. When the pressure is high, this could damage the die blade, and if it's too low, then your fabric cutting may turn out awful. And operators need to be very careful, as they need to calculate and make notes about how many patterns for different dies the product needs from time to time. At the same time, other digital cutters control systems have strong functions to automate the whole cutting process and reduce operators' requirements. Nesting software. Of the 4 cutting machines we are discussing, 3 need nesting software, and the die cutter is the only one that doesn't need this. So what exactly is nesting software? Nesting software was developed to arrange the necessary quantity of fabric to be produced while working efficiently and automatically. Thanks to the mathematical processing power of computers, this uses geometry from CAD, computer-aided manufacturing, files to output NC code to control various fabric cutting machines. This reduces cost and optimizes material usage. Cut pattern quality, affect product quality. One factor you should know is the cut pattern quality of each fabric cutting machine. This is directly proportional to the product quality, and you wouldn't want to rely on a device that delivers subpar fabrics. Instead, we want a machine with perfectly edged cuts, clean with no after stains, and pattern quality that is impressive to look at. Amongst all the cutting methods, the laser has the highest cutting accuracy. Comparing knife cutting machines with laser systems will show a clear difference. The laser beam melts the cut completely for the laser cutting machine, while the knife fabric cutter works by pulling the knife through the threads. Material wastage. Material wastage is a crucial factor in fabric cutting processes. Unfortunately, many fabric cutting machines have inbuilt settings that will not maximize the materials to the last millimeter. While this may seem insignificant at first, with time, you start to realize that a lot of these materials are wasted with each cut. Which machines save you on materials, and which ones lead to more material wastage? Multi-layer fabric cutter and die cutting machines require some millimeters of pattern distance when cutting, due to the pattern size differences between the top and bottom layers. In fabric cutting, every inch of the material is relevant to the process. Therefore, it reduces the incidence of material wastage as every millimeter is accounted for. Consumables and electricity consumption. Consumables and electricity consumption constitute a significant aspect of picking the best industrial fabric cutting machine. Since you would be running this machine for several hours daily, you wouldn't want to pick one that puts a significant dent in your pockets as you pay the power bill. Vibrating knife cutting machine. The vibrating knife cutting machine has the disadvantage of having huge consumables that need regular replacement, like the knife blades. Depending on your material and using frequency, you will need to replace the dull blades every 3 to 5 days, sometimes even shorter. This means that there is a lot of recurring costs when using this machine for fabric cutting. Multi-layer knife cutting machine. Similar to the vibrating knife cutting machine, the multi-layer knife cutting machine is also big on consumables. Since the functions on this machine are automatic and computer controlled, some of its components can be used multiple times, such as the cutting blades, sharpening tools, and conveyor belts. And the covering plastic film, mark paper and perforated paper need to be replaced together with the cut patterns. Fabric die cutter. Unfortunately, the fabric die cutter does not fare any better with consumables. As we discussed before, the fabric die cutter needs dies to work. For different designs, you will make different dies. This is a very time-consuming and money-consuming technique that also adds to your overall budget. On the plus side, the electricity consumption level is not as bad as the knife cutting machines. CO2 laser cutting machine. When it comes to consumables and electricity consumption, the CO2 laser cutting machine is a winner in this category. It has a small number of consumables that need to be replaced regularly. Laser tube is one of the consumables for CO2 laser cutting machines. But the made-in-China CO2 glass tube's ROI is super high. One 100W CO2 laser tube can last for over 2 years, based on 8 working hours per day. And you only need to pay about $300 to replace one. And focusing lens in the laser cutting head is another so-called consumable. It is made of glasses and needs to be cleaned every day. If the operator cleans it regularly and does not rop it and break it, it can be used for years too. Its electricity consumption is also pretty low. Overall, it's easy to pick which one fares well in the consumables and electricity consumption department. Can-do position cutting. Let's start with a bit of a breakdown of what position cutting is. If you have something like digitally printed fabric, embroidered or lace fabric, woven label, heat transfer film, and vinyl, and you need to cut along the specific outline of the graphic, we call it position cutting. CO2 laser cutter, oscillating knife cutter, and die cutters all have position cutting functions, while multi-layer fabric cutting machines don't. CO2 laser cutters and single-layer oscillating knife cutters can be equipped with a small CCD camera, top Canon camera, or bank projector to realize the position cutting. This makes use of the position equipment to view the products clearly, leading to more accuracy. The cutter can then use registration marks or graphic features to cut the fabric to size or cut along the edge with fine details. CO2 laser cutters and single-layer oscillating knife cutters' working principles are very similar in this position cutting aspect, but the knife cutter cannot handle embroidered or lace fabric and woven labels. Conclusion. It would be a shame to invest so much time and resources on an automatic fabric cutting machine that is not specific to fit your working process.